Motormouth Jenkins here, welcoming you to our brand new YouTube channel. Hope that you'll come back and see every segment each and every week, and I will share preventative maintenance tips and regularly scheduled maintenance tips for your car. So whether you know a little bit about your car or absolutely nothing, this is the channel just for you, where I share over 35 years of experience as a qualified and licensed service technician with truck and coach, light truck and passenger vehicles. Come back and visit us and tell your friends, and we'll see you each and every week right here in the Car Connection Workshop on YouTube. Welcome back to this week's edition of Car Connection in the Car Connection Workshop. Your host, Niall Motormouth Jenkins, in the driver's seat. We're working again on the Mercedes SUV. We had a couple of more items that we needed to take care of. Fuel system service and engine air filter service as well. Couple of things that I want to cover before we get going here is, first of all, to get into this engine here, we got the fuel filters right in the center portion, and the air filters one on either side. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge, but we got the tools and we can get it done in the know-how. So thanks for stopping by. We have a lot of things to get through here, so let's get started. All right, so that's how you get the cover off. It just sits in a couple of clips. Don't get rammy with it and everything will be all right. So we'll just take this and we'll set it out of the way. We're working outside here in Fort Erie, Ontario, Canada. It's a balmy 58.5 degrees. So here's where we're working, is right in the center core here. This is our fuel filter. But before I get going, before anybody makes a comment about my baskets, there's a reason behind baskets. And that is, I used to work in the field a lot. That means we got sent out into the service field. We were told the address, the piece of equipment, and then you hopped in the service car. All the toolboxes were in the trunk, but your job was to make sure your toolboxes were loaded with everything you could possibly need to get that piece of equipment running or get it out where it could be serviced. So in the shop, we had buckets, but I use baskets. You put all your tools in your bucket before you head underneath a big piece of equipment, and you think of just about everything you possibly could need so that you're not in and out underneath that vehicle constantly. So I still work the same way. I've been licensed 310T, which is truck and coach, and 310S, which is light truck and passenger vehicle. I've been licensed in Ontario and Canada and the Maritimes since 1988. So I have my way of working, and you may have your way of working, but at the end of the day, as long as we've done it right and tight and it's done properly, it doesn't matter. So these baskets, when I'm going to do a job, I think of everything I need to take my basket to the job, including an extra hand wipe. And yes, these were my old pajamas. What do you think? What do you think of that? You like that, tartan? Yeah, so I have everything I need in my basket to do this job. Here's the fuel filter. So in my mind, I see and picture it. I've got 2 clamps. I've got some clips I got to undo on the right and on the left. So I'm going to need something to take care of that. I'm going to need to take some hoses off. So I'm going to need something to take care of that. And I carry another basket, which I shove anything and everything in that could possibly throw me off is in here. So if I go into a U-pull at wrecking yard, I load this right up. There's not much I can't take off. So the best thing is to prepare. That's what I'm saying. Prepare to do the job so you're not running back and forth and wear yourself out before you get the job done. So my baskets are my best friend, and here's what I know. When I finish with a tool, it goes back in the basket. While I'm working, if I'm using this and I take some fasteners off, as soon as I'm finished, it goes back in the basket. And the reason for that is so that you do not leave a tool under the hood of somebody's vehicle or your own, because that can do a ton of damage. So let's get started. First and foremost, this vehicle comes with an option of a couple of filters. So what I generally do, and what we have done is there were two options. So if you haven't been able to do what I call I spy ahead of time, have a peekaboo at it so you know which animal you're dealing with, then get them both. You can always take one back as long as you don't destroy the box and you don't mess up the whole schmozzle. So in other words, don't have it out of the box and it's all covered in grease and oil and everything else, and then you expect to get a credit because the parts guys are going to look at you and give you a stink eye, let me tell you. So, okay, we have two. So John says it's this one. Have a peek. He says it's this one. I say it's this one. And the reason being is I cheated. I always look at the fuel line configuration. So we have an inlet and a return. And these lines are right here. And it looks to me like we have an inlet, a return. But you know, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. So we're going to have to take it off to have a really good look. But I think this could be the animal. This could be it. So stick around because we're going to show you more in just a little bit. We're going to start taking stuff off that has to come off in order for us to get in there and gain access. So again, don't just start pulling stuff off. Look at the job, assess the job, and if you have questions, here's the thing. I've said it before. You'll hear me say the words, here's the thing. And you can insert in that anytime, here's the point. Well, here's the thing. You don't want to take off stuff you don't have to. And if you're not sure how something comes off, don't just start reefing on it because that's when you end up breaking stuff. And I'll tell you, I fixed up some jobs from do-it-yourselfers that's like, you know what, you shouldn't even touch a blender. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. You've got to know your approach. So we got two air filter canisters here. We've got a plenum here that is going to feed airflow to both air filters. We got a fuel filter in the center. So we're going to need to get this beast out of here so we can access the filter. So that's what we're going to do right now. So stay with me. We're going to try and get these plugs off by hand. Sometimes you can. Hallelujah. Sometimes you can't. And if you can't, don't just start pulling on it because you think you should because it's not coming off. See, just like that one. So that's where I get my pinch pliers, and if it fits, great. If it doesn't, as I said, I always bring something secondary. And we'll see if we can get that. There's two methods. So again, oops, those two don't work. What are we going to do next? Well, we have a pick. So we'll put a pick on one side and push the ear in, if we can. You know, someone once said, if you think you can, you can, and if you think you can't, both are correct. Did you know that? But you know, since I'm working and you're watching, I like to talk. And if you're thinking of buying a diesel, you need to do your homework before you buy it because it's a great tool if you know how to take care of it. And if you think a diesel is maintenance free, think again. See how I got that off? I didn't get rammy and break the tabs off because that's what a lot of guys do. And then you got a problem afterwards because plugs need to be secure. If they wiggle a little bit, guess what? Service light's going to come on. You got drivability issues and it just gets ugly really, really fast. So getting back to owning a diesel, I'm going to tell you this straight up. Diesels are not maintenance free. They are not maintenance free. If you're buying a diesel because you think you don't have to do any service, excuse me for a minute while I get my other basket. Here we go. I always have the standby. If you think for 1 minute you're going to own a diesel and all you got to do is put diesel in it and take advantage of, you know, the torque, the power, and fuel economy, think again. A diesel's your best friend when you maintain it. Ask any truck driver. I challenge you, Ask any truck driver at a truck stop if he feels it's important enough to maintain his rig. He's going to give you some really good advice, because at $900 an hour downtime when that rig's not rolling, he doesn't need that rig to not be working. It's got to be working for him to make a living. And working in the trucking industry myself for Mack Trucks of Canada and Peterbilt of Ontario for many years, and that's how I got my diesel endorsement, I can tell you right now that the public makes a big mistake buying a diesel and thinking it doesn't need any maintenance, because that is not true. A diesel's your best friend when you maintain it. When you don't, it will get to a point where it will make you maintain it, and now it's going to cost you a lot of money. A lot of money. How many? I'm going to give you 2 questions today while I'm working, diesel related. How many know what phase separation is? You own a diesel. What is phase separation? I don't know if I should give you the answer right away, but phase separation is something you need to know when you own a diesel. Ask a truck driver. He'll tell you. Phase separation happens when we have minus temperatures in the winter. We live in Canada. We have snow, we can have ice, we can have freezing temperatures for days on end. Phase separation is when diesel fuel separates, the wax, the paraffins come out of it, and it turns into half-set Jell-O pudding in your fuel tank. So how many of you are putting an additive in your fuel to help lubricate your injection pump? Because we took sulfur out of the fuel. See what I did here? I undid one 10 millimeter reverse Torx here, and I undid one on this side, and now we have some flexibility to get this plenum piece out of here. So we're going to pull this back. It's not easy, but don't get rammy, because we got to get it off of here, off of this point here. So I think I'm going to go one extra step and remove it from here, because sometimes this can be tight here, and then that'll give us a little bit of room as well. So phase separation. When we get into minus temperatures, that's when the paraffin and the diesel separate, and it becomes cloudy in your fuel tank, and it sets up like half-set Jell-O pudding. The vehicle doesn't run. How do you take care of that? How do you prevent phase separation? So we're lucky in Ontario that we've had some mild winters, but if we get a 2-week cold snap, phase separation happens very, very quickly. So truck drivers know they have to put some treatment in the diesel, otherwise it will separate, it'll gel up, and then the truck doesn't run. Your diesel's exactly the same way. You're putting diesel in the tank. So I will do a segment just on fuel so that I can teach you what you better know, because when it happens, it will cost you a lot of money, because all that fuel in the fuel tank has either got to come out, or we got to add a product and hope that we can get it to come back together. If it doesn't, we got to draw it all out of the tank. We got to start from fresh. The fuel filter be absolutely plugged, and you got problems. You got big problems. Filters are critical when it comes to a diesel. Fluids and filters. How many of you know what a water separator does on your diesel? Anybody? There's a sensor right here that monitors. Here's the fuel filter right here. This sensor monitors water in the fuel. You don't want that sensor to go off. You don't. What you want is this filter should be changed once a year based on how much fuel you're using. And my theory is this: once a year, no headaches. Wait till it fails, headaches. Because when that light goes on, you'll be lucky if you can get your diesel home or started. And if it's minus temperatures, water in fuel freezes. it will plug your fuel filter solid and that car is not going to run. You will not get it started. And how do I know that? Being around diesels for quite a number of years, it happens. I worked for Volkswagen in Canada, and I'll tell you what, a lot of people bought the VW TDIs, and they had to face phase separation of their fuel and then icing up of the fuel filter because no one taught them that you have to maintain your diesel and you have to understand the fuel and you have to treat the fuel. You have to treat the fuel. If we have a mild winter, you'll probably be okay. But if we have a cold snap, we had diesels towed by the hour back to the dealership, driving down the highway, 401 series, and the diesel shut off. So we're going to prevent that here for John and get him back on track with fuel system servicing and air filter servicing. The filter in here is 2 years old, maybe more, but we'll see what we get when I take the filter out because I'm going to do a little test on it so that we can see what's been waiting for us inside that fuel filter. So stick around. I'm going to putter away here and get this filter out and get this plenum out, and then we'll come back with more right after this. So stick around for more of Car Connection and how to take care of your diesel engine so that it will be friendly to you and your bank account. All right, and we're back with the Car Connection Workshop. Again, your host, Niall Motormouth Jenkins, in the driver's seat. We now have the plenum off. We are going to replace the fuel filter on this diesel, but here's a telltale sign that you have problems coming. And that's why I said in the previous segment, diesels will be your best friend if you maintain the daylights out of them. You don't buy a diesel and expect to do no maintenance other than an oil change periodically and put fuel in it. It's beyond that. Diesels are your friend till you're lacking on the maintenance and it becomes a nightmare for you and your budget. Here's what we got coming up. This is the plenum. This is our turbo. Let me use the screwdriver to point. This is our turbo. This is our turbo line. And here's our sensor. I've taken that off. We have a lot of oil residue here, but even worse, we have oil residue in here and we have oil right here. So the seal in the turbo is leaking. That means the oil seal in behind, because you have oil lines that feed the turbo bearings and there's a seal back there. We should not see oil on the front side of the turbo. So, oh, sorry. Am I in the way? Am I in the way? So we've got fresh oil laying here. We've got fresh oil laying here. And this is the intake. So all that should be on this side is air, not oil. So that means we've got an oil seal in the turbo that's been going for a while because it's wet back in here, it's wet here, it's wet here, and it's wet inside the air intake. So this is the air intake to the turbo. How many of you know on your diesel how to treat your turbo? Because your turbo is your friend or your enemy. How many of you, when you pull the vehicle over into park, just turn the key off on the engine? Just shut it right off. Well, I'm going to tell you something. I'll get a smaller screwdriver. See this impeller in here? That impeller is spinning at thousands of RPM, and when you don't let this spool down, that's what you need to do. Turbo engines, you don't pull in somewhere and shut it off. Never. I'll repeat that. Never. You need to let this turbo impeller slow down so it's at idle. The engine's idling, let the turbo spool down. Don't accelerate it while you're sitting there parking. You give it about a minute or so before you shut your diesel down. When you don't, that's when you wear out the impeller shaft and the blades on the inlet side of the turbo. But worst of all, you wear the seal in the back of the turbo, because when you shut the engine off, there's no oil lubricating the back bearings and the seal on the back side of the turbo. So every time you just shut it off, you're wearing your turbo, just so you know. And turbos, they're not like buying a coffee and a donut at the takeout. This is going to cost you, but this is a telltale sign the turbo is going. The seal is going. Where do we go from here? Well, it's not going to self-heal. The seal is going, and there's oil in there, and we'll clean that up before we put it back together, but that is a down the road soon, not a if, it's when. It's not an if, it's when it lets go. And the problem with when it lets go is the turbo will then take motor oil from the engine and suck it into the engine, and it becomes fuel. And sometimes you can't shut it off even when you turn the key off, because it's sucking the oil out of the oil pan and putting it in through the turbo into the intake manifold, and it's burning. That was a bee there, John. I saved you. So these are signs. This is not an if, it's when the turbo seal goes completely. And this causes a drivability issue too, because you're pulling oil through. So I'm anxious to see the condition of the air filter, so stick around for that. We're going to get to the fuel filter next. Then we'll pull the filter housings and have a look at the engine filters, because here's the other thing on a diesel. The air filters are absolutely critical. If the engine can't breathe, the turbo can't cool off. Ever tried sleeping with a pillow over your face? Or did you do that when you were a kid, playing around? It's tough. Well, your diesel engine's exactly the same way. It needs oxygen, it needs oil to lube the bearing, and it needs to spool down before you shut it off. How many of you know that about your diesel? There's a lot of things to know before you say, I'm just going to buy a diesel. You have to get educated, and you have to be willing to maintain it to its utmost. Otherwise, it's a nightmare. It turns into a money-eating, well, we used to call them money-sucking pigs at that point. Then all of a sudden, I don't think I want my diesel anymore. So it's important to know before. So we're going to cover this. We'll clean this out when the time comes, and we'll put some engine filters in. But right now, we're going to change the fuel filter. So let's get it out of there. Okay, and we're back. We've removed the old filter, and now we're assembling the new filter. This is the water sensor that goes deep inside the filter, and here's the two prongs. And what happens is, as the water level in the bottom of the filter rises and makes contact with the two metal posts, then it triggers your light to come on in the dash to let you know that you have water in your fuel. Now, we've replaced these two O-rings. Be careful when you take the old ones off, because if you wreck a new one, you can still use the old one and you can roll it. And I'll show you that trick on something else. But here we go. We put the new O-rings on. The top one is bigger than the bottom one, and we've lubed them up. I use this product a lot. No, they don't sponsor our YouTube channel or anything, but this is a product I've used for decades. I use it to do brake servicing. I use it on electrical. It's an amazing product, and I put it on O-rings. You never want to put a sensor like this or anything that has O-rings in dry. So we put a little bit of that lube in here. And again, guys, you only need a little bit. You don't need to put it on like a 1/4-inch bead, and same with on the O-rings. Just put some on your fingers, rub it on the O-rings, and watch how easy that goes in. So we just pop that right in there like that, all the way down. We're going to rotate it till the screws are there. And we've also lubricated the center post, which is, it's a bleeder valve. So that should squirt out of there. If you want to put I usually put a hose on there so that it squirts into a container for me, not all over the customer's engine. And we'll show you how we do that when we get everything back together. So I put a little bit of lube on the plastic threads, and now look at how easy that goes in there. No problem. All right, so we'll be back with more. We're going to get the filter put in and the lines put on, and then we'll see you again for the wrap up of the fuel filter replacement. So that's what it should look like. We take these off when we're ready to attach the hoses, not until. We want no dirt going down into that filter. So work clean. You know, make sure your hands are kept clean and everything is clean, because that's where the biggest problem comes. You don't want any dirt in the plug. You don't want any dirt in the plug that goes into the sensor as well. You want it to be clean and dry. So we'll see in a few minutes as we begin to put this filter back in, and then we move on to changing the engine air filters, and we'll bleed the system. So stick around for more of Car Connection. We'll be back in a moment. Well, thank you for stopping by the Car Connection Workshop right here on YouTube. Don't forget to come back and join us for another segment. So like, share, tag, and follow, and ding that bell so that you don't miss a single edition of Car Connection. So till next time, keep it under 100 and put the coffee on, because we're coming to your house.